Vasseur speaks and Ferrari shakes. Hamilton's future questioned. The team divided. And before Austin Maranello is burning from the inside out. Fred Vasseur's words didn't just describe a technical issue, they tore open the deepest wound in Ferrari's modern history. When he declared that the SF-25 was fundamentally defective, it wasn't just a criticism of engineering. It was a declaration of cultural failure. Ferrari's mystique has always been built in the idea of perfection, the red car as a symbol of speed, pride, and precision. But behind the glamour, the team had been drowning in quiet dysfunction. Vasseur didn't whisper it, he said it aloud. And in that moment, the myth cracked. The very leader hired to protect Ferrari's image had just stripped it bare. For Lewis Hamilton, it was a revelation as much as it was a confirmation. Since joining Ferrari, he's been patient analytical in debriefs, measured in public, refusing to show frustration even as the car slipped further from competitiveness. He's endured endless experiments in setup, spending hours in the simulator to correct behavior that no adjustment could tame. To him, the car's inconsistencies were like a puzzle without a final piece. Now he finally knows why. There was no piece missing, the puzzle itself was wrong. "We built speed without control," one engineer admitted. "It's like putting a jet engine on a bicycle." That's what Hamilton has been driving all year, a machine built for dreams, not for reality. Technically, the SF-25's flaws are cruelly simple and devastatingly complex. The aerodynamic concept depends on an ultra-low ride height designed to exploit ground effect to its maximum. But the chassis, too stiff and thermally unstable, can't sustain that aerodynamic load consistently. Under braking, it flexes unevenly. Under cornering, it overheats. The result is a car that behaves differently in every sector, sometimes even every lap. For the driver, that means no reference points, no rhythm, no trust. It's a nightmare not because it's slow, but because it lies. On one lap, it feels perfect. On the next, it's gone. That's why Hamilton and Leclerc have described the car as unpredictable, a polite word for undrivable. Inside Maranello, the discovery triggered a kind of professional grief. Engineers who had devoted months to refining the car's floor design and suspension geometry realized their work had been doomed from the start. Every adjustment, new brake ducts, reprofiled edges, modified dampers had been an attempt to fight physics with software. "We were tuning an illusion," said one anonymous member of the aero team. The irony is that Ferrari's data was never wrong, it was just incomplete. The numbers in the simulator matched predictions perfectly until the car met the asphalt. That's the cruel reality of modern Formula One. You can build a masterpiece on paper that fails the moment it touches the real world. For Hamilton, this is more than a mechanical crisis, it's an emotional one. He came to Ferrari not for money, not for nostalgia, but for legacy. After 2 decades in the sport, he wanted the ultimate challenge, to take Formula One's most legendary team back to glory. But now he finds himself fighting a battle he can't win with talent alone. When the car lies to you, a source close to him said, "It doesn't just hurt your confidence, it hurts your identity." For a driver who's built his career on control and precision, discovering that control itself has been impossible is a cruel twist. It's like an artist realizing the canvas is warped. Vasseur knows this. He's seen the same frustration in both drivers, Hamilton's quiet disbelief, Leclerc's weary resignation. That's why he decided to speak. His admission wasn't reckless, it was strategic. For months, Ferrari's leadership had been paralyzed by fear of public backlash, of shareholder reaction, of breaking the illusion that everything was under control. But Vasseur chose to break it anyway. He knew the cost. He knew that saying the truth would divide the team, enrage executives, and ignite the media. But he also knew something more dangerous. If Ferrari kept pretending, it would rot from the inside. His words weren't just a confession, they were an ultimatum. Inside Maranello, the effect of Vasseur's statement was immediate and electric. In one sentence, he had broken a rule older than most of the engineers in the building. You never admit Ferrari is wrong. For decades, the Scuderia has built its identity on silence and mystique, a culture where mistakes are buried, not discussed. But Vasseur's decision to expose the truth ignited a storm. Meetings that once began with cautious optimism now began with tension. Engineers stopped talking in technical code and started arguing in plain language. "He said what we didn't dare to," one aerodynamicist confessed. "And now we have to prove him right or wrong." That's the paradox Vasseur unleashed. Brutal honesty, followed by brutal accountability. At the technical level, the shock turned into obsession. Ferrari's engineering division, already divided between the old guard and the new generation, began a forensic dissection of the SF-25 structure. For weeks, they'd been chasing the same ghost through simulation data: sudden aerodynamic loss under braking, unpredictable rear-end oscillation, inconsistent tire degradation. Vasseur's comments gave those ghosts a name. The culprit wasn't setup or driver error, it was the car's own DNA. The suspension architecture was too rigid to handle aerodynamic compression. The underfloor geometry was too sensitive to surface vibration. Every millimeter mattered, and every millimeter betrayed them. One engineer described it perfectly: the car works in theory until the track reminds it that theory isn't reality. Ferrari's technical director, Enrico Cardio, was said to be furious not at Vasseur for speaking out, but at himself for letting it get this far. He and his team had pushed the envelope in search of aerodynamic gains, sacrificing mechanical forgiveness for theoretical efficiency. Now that gamble had turned into a trap. The car's aerodynamic window was so narrow that even ambient temperature changes could ruin balance. "We build a car that breathes only in perfect conditions," said a senior engineer. "And Formula One never gives you perfect conditions." It's a mistake that has cost Ferrari millions and cost its drivers their faith. Inside the simulator suite, Hamilton's reaction to all of this has been measured, almost surgical. Those close to him describe a man who has shifted from frustration to purpose. He's not chasing perfection anymore, he's mapping its limits. His approach is simple: understand the car's flaws, live with them, and exploit what's left. He's been sitting with data analysts deep into the night, recalibrating inputs to match the SF-25's erratic balance points. "If the car can't be stable," he reportedly told engineers, "then I have to become the stability." It's the mindset of a driver who has seen both sides of Formula One dominance and disaster, and knows that composure is the rarest weapon in chaos. Leclerc, meanwhile, has responded differently. Where Hamilton approaches the problem like an engineer, Leclerc approaches it like an artist fighting against a broken instrument. His frustration isn't logical, it's emotional. He can feel the car's instability in his fingertips, in every mid-corner twitch, in every snap of oversteer that ruins a perfect lap. The SF-25 denies him the flow he depends on, the instinctive rhythm that makes him fast. In Singapore, his onboard footage showed a man wrestling the steering wheel as if arguing with it. His debriefs have become shorter, sharper, filled with words like inconsistent, unpredictable, and hopeless. And yet, despite that frustration, he still pushes harder than anyone. Because for Leclerc, Ferrari isn't a job, it's identity. And identity doesn't retire. While the drivers fight their own battles, the engineers are living through a quiet revolution. Vasseur's truth has broken down silos that years of management failed to. Aerodynamics, mechanics, and performance analytics teams that once guarded their data now sit side by side. Engineers have been ordered to cross-review simulations, rebuild correlation models, and stop defending their turf. "It's the first time in a decade we've been told to argue," said one staff member, "and it feels free." Vasseur's bombshell didn't destroy Ferrari's engineering culture, it detonated its fear. The team is finally confronting its own contradictions, the same contradictions that Hamilton sensed the moment he joined. In the days following Vasseur's bombshell, Ferrari didn't feel like a race team, it felt like a courtroom. Every meeting began with silence, and every silence carried tension. Inside the glass-walled offices of Maranello's Gestione Sportiva headquarters, there were no celebrations, no small talk, only questions that no one wanted to answer. Who approved the car's design philosophy? Who ignored the warnings about its instability? Who allowed the illusion of progress to last this long? For a team that had spent years perfecting the art of secrecy, Vasseur's words were like a breach in the dam. And now, everything hidden began to flood out. The first shockwave hit the engineering hierarchy. Matteo Taganelli, Ferrari's head of track engineering, reportedly confronted Vasseur during a closed-door strategy meeting. His frustration was raw. "You can't rebuild Ferrari by destroying it in public," he shouted, slamming his notepad onto the table. Vasseur didn't flinch. "I'm not destroying it," he replied coldly. "I'm freeing it." Those who were present described the room as frozen. For years, Ferrari's culture had rewarded silence over truth, presentation over progress. Now, for the first time, the truth was standing at the head of the table. It wasn't diplomatic. It wasn't polished. But it was real, and for some inside Maranello, it was terrifying. At the same time, the political temperature inside Ferrari's executive circle spiked. John Elkann, Ferrari's president, and CEO Benedetto Vigna were furious at Vasseur's decision to go public. To them, Ferrari's image is sacred. The car may fail, but the myth must never crack. They summoned him to an emergency board meeting, demanding an explanation for what they called a breach of institutional discipline. Vasseur defended himself not as a manager, but as a realist. "Our drivers are fighting ghosts," he said. "If I don't tell the truth, we lose them too." His words were calculated but heavy. Everyone in the room understood what he meant. Hamilton and Leclerc weren't just drivers, they were Ferrari's credibility. Lose their trust, an entire foundation crumbles. Back in the garage, the tension was equally intense. Hamilton, usually the model of professionalism, finally showed a flicker of frustration. During a debrief, he reportedly told engineers, "I can't drive hope. I can only drive what's real." It wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. For months, he had kept morale alive by believing the car could be improved, by trusting that the team's process would eventually work. Now, after Vasseur's confession, he understood the scale of the problem and the limits of optimism. He stopped talking about upgrades and started talking about accountability. For Hamilton, the time for encouragement was over. It was time for truth. Leclerc, meanwhile, reacted differently. His silence was sharper than any words. The Monegasque, once Ferrari's loyal optimist, has now become its quiet skeptic. In media sessions, he's polite but detached, his tone flat, his confidence visibly eroded. Inside the team, he's become more analytical, less emotional. He listens more, smiles less. One engineer described it perfectly: he's gone from believing to observing. Yet despite his disillusionment, he remains fiercely competitive, almost defiant. His frustration fuels his speed. When asked about the car, he simply said, "It is what it is. We drive what we have." It was a line meant to sound calm, but in Maranello, it landed like thunder. And through all this, Hamilton and Leclerc have grown closer. Their alliance, born from shared frustration, has evolved into something Ferrari hasn't seen in years. Unity. They share notes, simulator data, even personal conversations about the car's behavior. Gone are the subtle rivalries, the quiet competition for dominance. They've replaced it with mutual understanding. "We're in this together," Hamilton reportedly told Leclerc after the Singapore weekend. "If they can't fix it, we'll survive it." That sentence has become a quiet mantra inside the team, whispered among mechanics, repeated during long nights at the simulator. It's no longer about victory. It's about endurance. Vasseur, for his part, knows that his honesty has created both allies and enemies. Some engineers respect him more than ever, calling his truth the only leadership Ferrari's had in years. Others want him gone, accusing him of humiliation and chaos. The Italian press, never gentle, is divided. Some hail him as the reformer Ferrari has always needed. Others label him reckless, a French pragmatist who doesn't understand the sacred weight of the red badge. But Vasseur seems unfazed. In private, he's told close associates, if the truth destroys Ferrari, then Ferrari was already broken. It's a dangerous statement, but also one of conviction. Inside Maranello, that conviction has created a strange kind of energy. The fear that once ruled the corridors has been replaced by something different: urgency. Engineers are no longer pretending the SF-25 can be saved. Instead, they're dissecting it piece by piece, turning failure into research. The team's focus has quietly shifted from damage control to rebirth. There's a feeling that Vasseur's chaos, though painful, might be cleansing. "He broke the glass," one mechanic said, "but at least we can see the sky now." For the first time in years, Ferrari feels human, fragile, flawed, but awake.